Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the talks. Very, very useful, very good indeed. My name is Gallo Pinto from EICAM. I just had a quick question regarding rainwater harvesting. It seems that nobody really mentioned that or covered it in any way, shape, or form, and I just wanted to get your thoughts about it, because it's obviously something that is used widely in other parts of the world, but for whatever reason, it's not something that we have talked about.
Well, I'll start. Yeah, rainwater harvesting, great. Yeah, the trouble is though, developers don't want to do it. It costs more money, and I can't see it really taking off until the government say you must do it. Really, I mean, as far as I'm concerned.
Certainly, when we were looking at the guidance to support the national standards, rainwater harvesting was something which we didn't include as a SuDS feature.
We have a, it's suddenly working. We have a SuDS handbook, which is in draft format at the moment, pending all of the processes going through later in the year, that was written by AECOM, and we do talk about rainwater harvesting in that. So yes, it is in our aspirational list.
And it will also be in the SuDS manual as well.
Can I say one extra thing? The other thing that we're also looking at is watering the plants on the development. So, I mean, because we're in extreme rainfall or extreme drought, it's often good to have a storage feature, which the porous pavement supplies. Then whoever's gardening on the development, watering the plants, has a ready supply of water long term, without paying extra for it or taking from streams.
I'll just ask the chairman. I can talk when I like, so I thought I'd just feed into that. Actually, a bit of experience. My experience from this suggests that generally, yeah, on individual and some of these sort of smaller developments, so it's not always as cost effective. But people with larger developments, and particularly industries, not people who are thinking, I want to build this development and sell it and move on, but organizations like Sainsbury's, Tesco's, and people who actually have big commercial, industrial type developments which they'll look after actually a lot of them are quite keen, and a lot of them have got sustainability type things they're trying to achieve. And while it might not be as ideal for individual developments, you'll be surprised that you won't need to say that much before some of them meet you halfway, particularly if as local planning authorities or as SABS, you take an interest in the organization, look at some of the things they're saying they're doing and quote it back to them. Very quickly, you'll be surprised how quickly they start to do that. Of course, you need to be able to show, as the current national standard says, things like that, you need to show that it's actually doing something. Obviously, it's doing so, it's taking something out. But there are potential opportunities, and then just don't miss them.
Just Peter Davies from Leeds City Council. I agree with the point that's been made. The trouble is that water harvesting doesn't have an impact on flood flows because you're required to drain your flood storage down after the flood has occurred. I use water harvesting in my garden. I keep all spare water that I possibly can. Unfortunately, if I have a really wet period, all my water butts are full and I don't need to water the garden. In the middle of a dry period, guess what? All my water butts are empty and I need water. It is largely about providing a source of water for other uses, and we do need to get into it, but it's not necessarily linked to flooding issues. It's about overall water usage.
Next question, please.
Graham Bailey, Sprunt Solutions. Going more onto a kind of urban context, I suppose, on the county level, problem we always come up against in terms of implementing and designing such features is when you start getting into the water boards and water authorities in terms of connections, and as soon as we start putting in things like collector pipes for exceedance and the bottom of swales and everything, we get the response of you can't connect into our system because it's now a land drainage feature. And then things like structural root cell systems and stuff, we end up having to do loads of tanking, and it like ups the cost, and that's where the developer suddenly goes, you said this was going to be cheap. It's not, and I don't know if there's sort of pushes in terms of research, or if you've got any sort of solutions or suggestions, I suppose, in how you kind of get around those sort of no answers, I suppose.
That's why we need SuDS regulations. Because water companies are not interested in sustainability whatsoever.
Some are, yes, a fair comment actually. And water within our area is proactively adopting SuDS and has written its own SuDS manual. So I feel that you can't tie everyone with the same brush.
But we're talking about whether they allow land drainage water into their systems, and they don't want it.
Well,
because it impacts on it.
not in all cases.
In Oxford,
relationship you have and how you explain things, I think.
in Oxfordshire, we got Thames Water, and they're the pits. They will line porous pavement roads because, yeah, well, that's fine. You know, because top of a hill, land drainage comes up and they can't go in their system. Yeah, we have all the problems. The only way we've got around it is using perhaps high-level overflows to highway drains, highway drain systems that way. You know, because to me, to line a swale or a porous pavement road is crazy. Because, I mean, they work in clay conditions. But in clay conditions, Thames Water will say, line it.
I just think the sooner we get Schedule 3, the better, really, because we'll just adopt it and that'll be it. And then we determine the connection into their sewerage system. But until we get Schedule 3, I think we're just stuck with the problem. I can't see there is a solution. I don't think there is a magic way of doing it.
So what you're saying, very quickly, is that Schedule 3 does permit connection on ostensibly landscape features to sewers.
But it's totally at the hand of the
Yeah, basically, yes. I mean, in the Flood and Water Management Act, basically, the SAB deals with rainwater. That's what we deal with. And so basically, if that goes into the system, it doesn't matter how it gets into the system. If it got to go to the sewer, we give the permission to do the connection. They might be able to tell us the means of connection. They might want a flow control structure. They might want a manhole or something, but we actually give the permission. They don't. So until we get Schedule 3, I think we're stuck with it, to be honest. Unless you live in Anglia and you've got Anglian water, obviously.
Before we leave that question, actually, I mean, is there anyone who's got some good experiences of how water companies or how they've been able to get around that? Again, the good things about this is for us to see what others are doing and so put some peer pressure on the ones that are lagging behind. Anyone with experience? Yeah.
Sorry, George Warren from Hammersmith and Fulham. I'm not here to defend Thames Water whatsoever. However, I am working with Thames Water on 3 pilot schemes, which they are actually spending a lot of money looking at. These are very urban environments in Hammersmith, Fulham and Kensington and Chelsea, where they're retrofitting into the street SuDS measures. And they're really heavily monitoring both the cost of implementation, the public perception of it, the maintenance costs, and also obviously the environmental aspects, such as the flows and the water quality benefits coming from it. So they are doing something about it, if maybe a little bit late in the day. But anyway, no, it's a good project, hoping to put it in by within this financial year. So.
Okay, I think someone else there.
Ian Baggs, MWH. Just to add to that, I think there's a huge opportunity. If by implementing SuDS, you can help the water companies achieve their outcomes, such as reduction of flooding, which they would have to compensate, I think there's a huge opportunity to actually get them on board, and I think there's an opportunity there for them to provide the local authority or implementing body financial assistance or support to do so. I wonder whether there's any links there or anybody's got any experience or vision to do that and actually actively engage with the water utilities and request that they actually assist financially or technically?
We've got some projects we're working on with Anglian Water where we have sat down with them and done the Ofwat determinations in partnership, and we're looking at the DG5 register where they've got properties that have flooded, and looking at what joint projects we can put in place to, one, tackle their issues around the flooding, and also address surface water issues ourselves. So I think, you know, there's a lot of negotiation to be had, but they're a business. You know, it's pointing out the benefits to all parties. That's all I can say, really. I think our experience has been a positive one.
Robin Campbell, Arup and Bristol City Council. I was just going to echo, I mean, Welsh Water and Wessex Water, both different experiences, one from Welsh Water in a retrofit context. It's around understanding they have a very constrained, very different language set and objectives, and echoing other comments really, you just have to understand what their drivers are. They are very, very different drivers, and also getting to the right audience. You have some who have a strategic vision and looking at overall business objectives, others who literally look at what their objectives are for the next 5 years. And if you're only talking about what's on the list for the AMP period, then you're never going to get something not on the list dealt with. So it's sort of two sort of options there. But I think in our experience, I think with Wessex and with Welsh Water, it's very much a case-by-case basis and having some flexibility. But I know that we're probably quite fortunate compared with others.
Great. Next question.
What are you guys doing about maintenance periods for SuDS in order to adopt them? I mean, I know that the national standards kind of nodded towards, I think it's 8 weeks or something, but as part of our commuted sums, we normally require like 12 months demonstration of maintenance period before handover. Can you put that on for SuDS? Do you do that through conditions or something like that?
We're saying that, I mean, using the same as the adoption of the highways. You know, which is 12 months. Sometimes it's 2 years, depending on the development. But you need to have a maintenance period to prove they haven't messed it up or something seriously goes wrong.
There's sort of just to answer it in two different ways. Within our authority, we, for anything with vegetation which we adopt in the highway, we insist on 2 years, because our landscape people tell us it takes 2 growing seasons for a plant to actually get used to its growing conditions. So in the first year it will actually grow within its root ball, and therefore it will look perfectly healthy. Second year the roots go out into the native soil and suddenly it thinks, I don't like this, and it will die. So they told us always have at least 2 years maintenance period for anything with vegetation. Regarding the national standards and the guidance for that, the 8-week period is actually just the administration period in which you have to respond to the request for adoption. Now, part of the discussion we had around bonding for SuDS was that the industry say there isn't any capacity for any additional bonds for SuDS in the future, because at the moment where they're putting in ordinary surface water drainage, that's adopted by water and sewerage companies and they have a 10% bond for that. Now if SABS then start asking for 100% bonds for the drainage element of the which they're going to adopt, they're saying there isn't the capacity within the industry to support that. So as part of the work we did, what we said was, well, if you're not going to bond it so much, in that case we will have to insist on having long maintenance periods to ensure that what you're putting in functions properly before we adopt it. And they weren't averse to that. Now obviously what you need to do is to actually condition that, because that's not actually within the Act itself and it's not covered by any regulation. So in fact most of the things that the SAB has to do aren't covered by the regulations themselves, most of it will actually be covered by condition. And within the guidance, if you've seen it on Knowledge Hub, in the guidance there are actually model conditions in there which we're putting forward as the sorts of things that you would need to put in place as a SAB. And one of them would be that if you're going to accept a lower bond figure, then obviously I would say that in accepting a lower bond figure, you say we want a longer maintenance period to prove it works. If the developer is averse to that, you say, well, we want 100% bond then. I mean, it's got to be a negotiated thing, I think. But overall, I would say the longer the maintenance period, the better. The other thing, obviously, is inspection. I can remember when I first started out 40-odd years ago, the clerk of works told me, you don't get what you expect on site, you only get what you inspect. And I think that's the most important thing. Any developer, it doesn't matter how good they are, it doesn't matter how good the ground worker is, at the end of the day, if you're not there, they'll cut corners because they're there to make a profit and to do it as cheaply and quickly as possible. The more time you can spend on site, the better. And so, obviously, that's another thing that you need to build into any work you do on SuDS is the inspection. And I think that's obviously ties in then with the maintenance period and to keep an eye on the works and as things are growing to see whether they work. I mean, I've got a site at the moment where the whole thing was planned. We actually adopt planting within the highway, and we found that around about 25% of the planting died. Half of it because the rabbits liked it, and they came along and ate it all. But the other half, basically, the plants the landscape architect had chosen just didn't like the ground conditions. And so they've had to take out around a quarter of the landscaping areas and change them all. So again, I think that's a sort of thing as a SAB, we're going to be quite dependent upon the information we get from our landscape department as to what will grow in different parts of the area. And maybe that's the sort of thing you've got to put in local guidance, that if you've got clay areas, you might need certain plants. If you've got drier, sandier areas, you might need different plants, or chalk or whatever. So that's the sort of thing which isn't in the national guidance, but which, as a SAB, I think forums like this is the sort of thing which we've got to share amongst ourselves as to how we look at that going forward.
Can I say a couple of things? We found often when you on large developments, we've had this on a couple of sites now, maintenance of ponds as they go through the development is not done properly. We've had ponds filled with silt because they're still constructing and the silt's moving through the development. So there's something to watch. Otherwise, you end up with a metre and a half of silt in a pond, in a retention pond. Apart from being a danger to users because it's an open space, it's ruining the pond. And the other thing, when they're planning SuDS, we've on one site found that where they planned 2 ponds in the area because of all the geotechnical information, you find one was going to be a retention pond, one's going to be a detention pond. They swapped over because they never do enough geotechnical information. So you've always got to expect to change. Once they start working on site, then that's when changes will come.
Just want to turn the discussion around a bit. There's been a lot of discussion from the LLFA point of view. I'm aware we've got a few developers here today, and I just wonder, from the point of view of developers who have to deal with 152 lead local flood authorities, probably with different things, hopefully guidance and things, make things more consistent. What's your angle on this? What are the things that you feel lead local flood authorities need to do, or in the way they approach this, that will actually mean that you can work together collaboratively to actually deliver SuDS?
Hello, Barry Gross and David Wilson Holmes. I've working with Gordon quite a lot in Oxfordshire, so he knows me quite well. We've met with different degrees of local authorities saying, no, we're not accepting one thing, we're as other local authorities are more willing to sit down with us and discuss things. We've got one site not a million miles away that half the site has been had to be put onto a management company because the local authority wouldn't accept to take any porous roads. Now, that, from our point of view, is something that we wanted to do as a measure to reduce or to increase infiltration, reduce anything off a site. But with not having the local authority adopt it, it puts management companies on site, which we don't want for developers, because that cost then goes back to the residents, which at the end of the day, that's not why we build a house or somebody buys a house. It's a long-term charge to them, and they still have a council tax for the roads as well. So once it comes into force, we will be a lot happier that we have one set of standards. This is what the local authority will be adopting. We haven't then got to be speaking to 5 or 6 different local authorities, getting different answers, and then still bringing in a management company to take over something that should have been picked up a long time ago. But one thing that I was going to ask a bit later, which I don't know if I'll pick it up now, this 30-year clause that we're basically being asked for commuted sums, where's that been set from? Because from any sites historically, once a site has been set and has been agreed through the 38, that is then maintainable at public monies. But at the moment, we're now being asked to contribute for a 30-year commuter sum to that, over and above of what was originally being asked for.
Well, as far as I know, it's always been on the life of the road. In Oxfordshire, I mean, okay, commuter sums, you're asked for things which are over and above the norm. Now, at the moment, porous pavements are not the norm. They're getting to be the norm, and I think it won't be long where we can't charge commuter sums for porous pavement because it will be the norm. Other than that, I know some authorities do charge for curbing everything. We don't. It's just got to be exceptional, you know, the standard. Really?
Well, other bodies, such as internal drainage boards, will charge a sum over 100 years. It just so happens that the norm for a local authority in terms of other development control, in terms of highways, has